So the next challenge that we have is called the Reportinator. However, to find it, we need to do a little bit of exploration first. So let's jump into our ship. After finishing the previous two challenges, we did not get any pointers on where to go next, so we can just go and sail around. What I did when I solved the objectives first was, at this point, just go around the shores of the different islands and try to find all the possible destinations, so I can go faster between them by just jumping in through teleportation, basically. But I try to do these videos in sequential order, solving the challenges one by one in the order as they are displayed on your badge. So let's go and continue our journey with our little ship. And by following the coastline of Christmas Islands, eventually we're going to bump into Rudolph's Rest. So we're going to dock here, and this gives us two new objectives. One is called the Reportinator, which is a level 2 difficulty challenge, and Azure 101, which is equally 2 out of 5 difficulty level challenge. These are fairly easy. Now the Reportinator is a little bit tricky, so we're going to check that one. You have the usual, I again need to hide the other players here so they don't get into our way. So we have the usual goose here. I think we already met the one on the Christmas Islands. Goose says Hong Kong. And we have Noel next to the Reportinator terminal. And on the other side of the coast here at the resort, we also have, I believe, another terminal. Yep, there is. So that's the Azure 101. And here at Rudolph's Resort, we also have the lobby area with a cotton candy machine, and Pepper here is a little elf. I'm just gonna click through quickly the dialogue here. This is going to be for the end scene. We don't have to do anything here, but I do recommend jumping here so that at the end scene you can just teleport to the lobby directly. But we're not going to need the lobby for the remainder of the objectives. All right, so let's hear out what Noel has to say. And this little elf here is going to give us a hint on Reportinator, explaining how large language models sometimes will give us kind of seemingly weird results. This is often referred as hallucination, which is not really a technical term. Basically, there is, in these statistical models, a variable that you can adjust to see how unlikely it would be to generate certain outputs. And if it's set too high, or maybe there's not enough context, then you might experience this thing that people like to refer as hallucinations. So just basically output that is plain wrong. And that's really showing and highlighting the limitations of these large language model based tools. So these are just statistical models. They're not really in the strictest sense what we would call like generic AI, but they're just tools, and very, very good tools for that matter. Okay, in the previous challenge with the Linux 101, it was kind of struggling, but you will see that that was because the context was kind of weird and playful. But with the Azure 101, I used ChatGPT again to give it another go, and it was much, much better, because that's a pretty straightforward challenge without any of the troll thing in there. So the task here is not to use a large language model, because, and I did try this one, I just gave the whole report to ChatGPT to try to figure out which issues in the report are correct and which ones are wrong. And it said, well, this looks all good to me, which is not surprising. However, that does not mean that it's not a good tool for report writing. I also did a test for ASRep roasting. I gave a prompt to ChatGPT to write me a template for an ASRep roasting issue with recommendations, explaining the vulnerability, giving some recommendations on not only prevention but detection and response, because this is something that we include in our reports. And the output was good, like really, really good. So don't diminish these tools, but this is a pretty interesting use case, and reviewing this report highlights some of the limitations of these models. However, what happened, it was that I poked around with ChatGPT on this challenge, and then I just started reading this, and maybe I was just overthinking it, but none of the issues looked good to me. And it's kind of context dependent what you call right or wrong, but basically here the task would be to read through the report and then mark the ones, the issues that you do not like. So we have 9 issues all together, and you need to pick it. I gave one go and it was rejected. So then I turned my attention to an alternative solution, which is using a burp suit. So here, if I just filter for Reportinator, I'm going to see the challenge loaded in the iframe. And if I make one attempt to submit, so this is the way I solved it. I didn't read the report, which I will highlight that it's a mistake. I admit that I made, because looking back now, I realized that there are a ton of hints for later challenges. who would have thought that? So here, I'm just marking the last issue incorrect, and I'm going to intercept this. Oh, actually, we don't even need to intercept it. Just a minute, the challenge comes back and says, nope, failure, try again. And I can see here that there was a post request generated to /check, and in the post body we have input 1 0, input 2 0, and so on and so forth, until the very end where we have input 9 equals 1, and the result is a failure. Interesting. So it seems like when I leave one issue correct, then the submitted value for the variable is a 0. If I mark it as an incorrect issue, or the chat MTP, which is the Christmas Island AI that the elves and Santa are using, it is going to be a 1 for that variable that we marked incorrect. All right, so I have the professional version of Burp Suit, but I believe even with the free one, you should be able to brute force this. And yes, it's shameful, but this is what I did because I just wanted to get to the tougher challenges, and this one I was kind of rushing it. So I decided I'm not going to read the report. Let's just brute force it, because we have 9 variables. I only have 2 values for those ones. So it's basically binary. And that means that I have 2 to the power of 9 combinations. 2 to the power of 10 is 1024 combinations. So that means 2 to the power of 9 should be 512 combinations, which is less than probably 2 seconds for burp to brute force. So I'm going to change this one back to 0. We start with all zeros, and I'm going to just auto mark here all the fields that I want to brute force. I'm going to leave the cookie untouched, and I need a cluster bomb type of attack. This will try all the different variations for the values, basically going in a nice sequence. It's going to be a bit cumbersome to configure 9 different sets for the payload, but the payload itself is super simple. So we're going to brute force numbers from 0 to 1 in 1 increments for payload set 1, and then the same thing for payload set 2. Yep, I have to click through all of them. It's kind of painful. I wish there was one more option here where you just, and maybe I'm not able to use burp correctly, but I think the pitchfork one is not working correctly in this case. Anyways, if you're in doubt, you can just consult the documentation of burp, or I guess this would be also a good use for ChatGPT and ask ChatGPT how to do this kind of brute force attack. But we're almost there. Really hope that I said it correctly for all of them. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yep, looks good so far. 7. Then payload 8 is also numbers. So the last one, numbers. And then give it a 1. All right, so request count 512. That looks good. Payload count 2 for each payload set. Let's give it a go. Okay, attack is running. Now in the response side, we have failure here as a result. What I'm going to do is I'm going to filter this as it runs through, and it just finished. And I'm going to say, let's do a negative search here, apply it, and only one request remains here with a hash value and the combination that we need. I'm gonna save this one to my little notes.txt file here, and then I can go back to the proxy, set on intercept. Okay, maybe just at the very last minute when I'm about to submit this one. Okay, so this is going to work like this. I'm going to intercept the request, and I'm just going to swap it with the right one. Submit review. I could have gone there and manually tick the right boxes, but hey, let's be efficient, right? So this is going to send the post request. We're not even intercepting the responses, but it's fine. So just gonna forward that. Actually, let's release it. And the report validation is complete. Yay! Now, should you solve the challenge this way? Absolutely not, okay? So it's probably not the best approach here. We're just going to talk to Noel about this. Very good. So why is it a bad idea to do it this way, even though this is pretty fast? If you start actually reading the findings, the first finding is about an Active Directory vulnerability that affects the certificate service. And it mentions a tool Certify that you should run with find-vulnerable option. You will see in the Active Directory video that that's exactly what you have to do in that challenge. And that's a 4 out of 5 difficulty level challenge. So this one actually tells you how to run one of the key tools that you need to use in that challenge. SQL injection vulnerability in Java application. You will see in the very last objective where you need to manipulate a Java-based application that there's a SQL injection in that application. What else? Java deserialization in stored database objects. Well, that's just outright what you have to look for in the final challenge, which is a really tough one, by the way. And this one tells you that, there's some Java serialization, deserialization going on about stored database objects. Now, the issue itself is garbage, but just the titles will give you really good hints. Here's another one. There's going to be a challenge later that is called, I believe, SSH shenanigans or certificate shenanigans with SSH in the shenanigans part. And this issue mentions discovered a parameter called sign principal. Now that's, I believe, not the variable name. I think it was just principal, but that's exactly what you need to include with one of the requests to escalate privileges in that challenge, which is a 5 out of 5 difficulty level challenge, if I remember correctly. So this one just tells you what to do. And then the fifth one, Azure Key Vault. Azure Key Vault will be a key component, something that you need to enumerate in the Active Directory objective. So again, yet another hint just in the title. Started exercise. So the rest of the issues in this report are not really hints, but the others are all hints for later challenges. I wonder how many of the players discovered this one, because I certainly didn't. Just after actually reviewing this this year's Holiday Hack Challenge. Okay, but this challenge, you can just solve it with burp without reading the report. So we got our achievement and the objective completed. So awesome. Pretty easy challenge, even if you're not using any automation to brute force the possible answers. You can just read the report, and the ones marked, so I think it was the third one, the sixth one, and the ninth issue there, are kind of wonkier than the others when you do read this. This is probably a properly rated challenge, which is a 2 out of 5 in the difficulty level. Let's just move on. There's another easy one for Azure CLI, basically 101 practice, and that is feeding into the Azure Active Directory and Azure and Azure based Active Directory challenge. So it's not really Azure Active Directory related, which is now called Entra ID anyways, but it is starting off with Azure resources and then moves on to kind of on-prem Active Directory, which is not on-prem Active Directory, it's Active Directory in Azure. I know it's very confusing, but it will be clear when we get there. But first, let's learn how to use the CLI tool in the next video.